Welcome to Highways and Hometowns, the podcast that takes you on a high-speed journey through resilient infrastructure, economic growth, and celebrates the beating heart of Texas, as well as hometowns throughout America. Join us as we dive into the triumphs and challenges of communities, adapting and innovating amidst the twists and turns that go into the extraordinary achievements that shape our world. Get ready to build knowledge, lay some concrete foundations of success, and ride the waves of progress on one of the most engaging engineering podcasts in the Lone Star State. This is Highways and Hometowns.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Highways and Hometowns, presented to you by the Texas Concrete Pipe Association. This is going to be the podcast that paves the way to a resilient, sustainable future, one concrete milestone at a time. The podcast that will take you on a high-speed journey through Texas's resilient infrastructure, insane economic growth, and much, much more. We're going to get into all that, but before we go any further, let's introduce our host, the one and only concrete cowboy himself. You've seen the cowboy hat come around here and there, Patrick Tarlton.
How is everybody today? We're glad to have you here live from Waco, Texas at the Texas chapter of APWA's The Mammoth Conference. You know, I got up this morning.
Yep.
You forget how great Waco is.
Yep.
Went stumbling around the city, took a little jog down the Brazos River.
Right.
Stopped over at Magnolia, had the famous biscuits and strawberry butter.
Exactly.
And then got to roll in here to an action-packed conference, 3-day conference.
Right.
Loving it.
Right. Yep. God bless Texas, like you hear right now. You know what? Speaking of forgetting, I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Steve Nilforoushan with the Concrete Pipe Association of Texas, also Director of Technical Resources with Rink Materials. So I work together with Patrick through the association on educating Texans and public works and infrastructure and DOTs on the benefits of concrete infrastructure, if you will. So our podcast here, Highways and Hometowns, we're going to talk about everything from infrastructure, development, economic growth, you name it. What else, Patrick? What else are we going to touch on this podcast?
Yeah, look, the Texas Concrete Pipe Association membership, we're going to talk about what impacts Texans in their everyday lives, right? Everything from your streets to your sanitary systems, all the way down to the global broadband that you have, things that make life worth living, the modern building blocks of civilization. But we're going to get into it and discuss it all.
Right.
Steve, I preparing for this, I had a short list of number ones. Everybody has a list of number ones.
Let's hear
right?
it, buddy. Let's hear it.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about when somebody says, "Oh, what's going on in Texas?" I wanted to share
what's not going on in Texas.
Bingo.
Exactly. Okay.
All right, ready? Here's the short list of Texas number ones. Largest state economy in the country.
Ooh.
9th largest economy in the world. Most sought after state to live in. Number 1 state for new businesses, 18 years straight. Number 1 exporting state in the country for 21 straight years. Largest annual infrastructure funding per state. Largest infrastructure system in the country. Most rail miles per state. Most state highway miles per state. And by the way, if that wasn't enough, we're the home of Buc-ee's, Yeti, and Joe Rogan. All right? Don't forget those.
You got to have the Buc-ee's. I stopped for a Buc-ee's first time, and I was like, I got to see what this craze is about. It's great. It's insane. It's like it's a massive super Walmart, if you will, or a Costco, but it's like a gas station. I mean, and everybody, it's a huge tourist attraction. So I was very impressed. And the food in there is homemade, all kind of little, what is it? The Buc-ee's, what is it?
If you hadn't had beaver nuggets, you're not living.
Yes,
you're not living.
Exactly. So tell everybody where we're at right now. We're at the Texas Public Works Association Conference, the Mammoth Show. It's a great conference. You want to tell us a little more about it?
Yeah, look, every year Texas chapter of APWA comes together, brings in the greatest minds from public works divisions all over the state, everywhere from Houston to Dallas to Abilene to Beaumont. We were meeting people from El Paso and McAllen yesterday. Everybody comes together to share innovation, best practices, the new things happening around the state that maybe your city is going to be challenged with later, right? It's 3 days. When you leave those 3 days, I always think, my God, we packed a lot into 3 days. It's 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every night. But look, it is the best public works show there is in Texas every year.
And I want to give credit to all the public works agencies throughout Texas of doing such a phenomenal job throughout the state. I've been I'm originally from Louisiana, and I live in California now. And the growth I've seen in Texas through all the cities and public works has just been exponential. Every time I come to Texas for work, it seems like it's growing further and further and more. The roads, the highways, the developments, the residential, you name it. And there is, I mean, you see it on the news. People from California, they're all coming to Texas, and I see it firsthand. And that influx is nonstop. So hats off to all the public works agencies for doing such a phenomenal job.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal the line from Governor Abbott. He said it about 3 weeks ago. He said, "Look, 1,000 people, 1,100 people move to Texas every day. So every time you wake up, there's 1,100 new people here, and they don't bring roads, they don't bring stoplights, they don't bring houses, they don't bring anything. They show up and they say, hey, when I flip the switch, I want the lights to come on.
Right.
When I flush the toilet, the water better run."
Right.
And so the public works departments across the state are literally the boots on the ground for all of that infrastructure.
Exactly. Without them, it couldn't be done. So like we said earlier, we're going to have guests throughout this podcast. Here from the show, we're gonna do 4 of these podcasts, but we're gonna plan on doing these once a month, bringing you guests from public work agencies, DOT, TxDOT, even on the political realm, some legislative leaders, if you will. So without further ado, we're going to bring our first guest to our first podcast. She's Director of Transportation and Drainage for the City of Houston, Veronica Davis. So a round of applause for Veronica Davis. If I had an applause track, but I don't know where it's at right now. Veronica, how are you doing?
I am here and trying to figure out how to get these headphones on.
There we go. You're on now.
Oh, there it is.
Welcome. So glad you can join us.
Thank you. It's exciting to be the first guest.
You are the first.
And I heard you guys talking about Texas being number one. And
yes.
Things are bigger in Texas, but it's huge in Houston.
Very huge, very huge. So how long have you been with the City of Houston?
I started in January 2021.
Okay. All right.
I moved here from Washington, D.C., so a very different atmosphere to be in the East Coast and to Texas, but I love it. Houston's got great food.
Yes, it does.
I know we're supposed to be talking about highways.
Yeah.
And I know we talked about Buc-ee's, but the highway to the food in Houston.
Need
no
more
doubt
of them.
about it.
That's why we need walkable streets so I can walk off the pounds from eating all the barbecue.
There you go. There you go. So with your experience in Houston, tell us kind of mainly what you do, what your job that he's done, and what you oversee.
Right. So my title is Transportation and Drainage Operations. It's a very rare title.
Yep.
Allegedly, there's one other person in the country that has a similar title, but I have not met them yet. And the reason why it's linked is because our roads are part of our drainage network. So I'm over 16,000 lane miles,
wow.
Over 2,500 traffic signals, over 2,500 miles of roadside ditches. I have about 3,500 miles of storm sewers, 35 detention basins, over 1 million signs. I'm over it all. As one of my friends says, I run the streets. I have it all.
You got a full plate.
I mean, just a little bit. And then on top of that, the physical infrastructure, we are frontline employees.
Right.
So we are there in emergencies. We support the fire department. We've done everything from body retrieval to assistance with knocking down buildings.
Right.
And then when there is a weather event, we're in it.
Yep.
We buckle down and we're in it and handle whatever we need to handle.
Yeah, I'm glad she brought up weather. So right now we're going through some extreme weather temperatures. The heat here in Waco is we're in the almost 110s right now, and it's only June.
But it's breezy compared to what the temperature was in Houston.
Well, in this conference hall, it's really breezy. They have the temp down to like 40 degrees, hence why I'm wearing a jacket right now. But the temperature's been all this climate change, if you will, and every year we're about to start hurricane season. And we're in it. And I know Houston's seen its share of, impacts from hurricanes. So how important is, the TCPA, we talk a lot about resiliency and sustainability and how important resiliency is with roads, highways, storm drain infrastructure, so on and so forth. So, shed some light from the city of Houston aspect on how resiliency is a key focus for you guys.
Yeah, we just finished our Resilient Houston plan about 2 years ago. And with that, it really is of how do we manage these big climate events? How do we live with water, right? We are a flat city with clay soil, so that water is not going anywhere once it hits the ground. And so being able to live with water. So through that, specifically to my service line, we just released a resilient sidewalk plan. that really looks at our infrastructure and how our sidewalks can be part of our drainage system. So, but with that too, I mean, it's not just about putting together the plan. It's also about doing pilots. So on the drainage side, we just recently completed a drainage project around a park using permeable concrete pavers around the park, and created a drainage system so that we can actually hold a lot of water within the sidewalk. We did the same thing with the street where we've done some porous pavers to be able to hold some of that water in the middle of the street, and so we are going to be testing. We're working with the U.S. Geological Service to actually test the water quality. So it's not just about holding water. Are we actually making it better before it goes back into our waterways? And we've been using goats, which have been super popular with the neighborhoods. Absolutely.
Like the animal goats.
Like the animal goats.
All right.
Best lawnmowers in Texas, right there.
Lawnmower in Texas.
I didn't know if she was talking about Joe Burrow, the goat, or, but anyway. So goats, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have, as I mentioned, 35 detention ponds. And so that's a lot of equipment and everything to try to just manage the growth there. We have very strict rules about using herbicide in detention ponds. So we have about 150 goats that are contract employees that get out there, and in about 10 days, they can clear out a whole detention pond. The neighbors love them.
Can I get about 100 of them, like at a Home Depot or something? I mean, that's what, you don't have to change the gas. Don't have to worry about that.
Exactly.
Kind of like that.
And I've learned so much about goats that I didn't know. Like, they don't like to get their feet wet. And I'm like, but you're
a goat.
Animal. You're a goat.
In the city of Bayous, they don't like to get their feet wet. I love that. There you go.
That's awesome.
So that's also about sustainability and resiliency. And I know that we talk about hurricanes, but what we're really seeing, it's the extreme temperatures. I know we're in extreme heat right now. But even the last 2 winters, it's been the extreme freeze. And as you know, our energy grid went down. And so that affects our pump systems, both on the stormwater side and the drinking water side. And so it has really moved us to now we have to think about not just extreme heat, but also extreme cold. In Houston, where we've never had to deal with negative 19 degrees.
Veronica, it's wild you mentioned that. I read an article 2 weeks ago that Houston is the hardest hit large city in America by natural disaster. And I immediately jumped to hurricanes. I thought, it doesn't seem they're that regular, to Florida or something. It's not just hurricanes. It's everything you mentioned. And that the totality of the impact to the overall system is just massive. It's the hardest hit city in America for the last decade.
Exactly. I mean, and even just regular storms, a good 20-minute storm can really, bring our entire system to a halt because it's just the water doesn't have anywhere to go. There's a really funny comedian on Instagram, Chinado, and he talks about in Houston, he's like 105 pouring rain and the roads are impassable. 115, everything's clear like nothing happened.
You may have mentioned it, but what's your favorite project going on right now? What's the one that's near and dear to your heart?
My favorite project. It's actually going to be on the rail side. So under the bipartisan infrastructure law, there has been billions now that have put towards rail. And that has been very traditionally underfunded because everything's bigger in Houston. We have over 700 at-grade rail crossings.
700?
Over 700. And so every time that train, and then with the Port of Houston, you have that traffic going in and out, and we really are the heart of America. And one little blip in Houston has a trickle effect throughout all of the country. But rail is an important part of our economy, in the region as well as the state. But the impact is every time that train stops on the roadway, fire EMS can't get to emergencies. People are trapped. We have videos of kids going through trains to get to school.
Wow.
And so it's really been a huge safety issue. And so with the bipartisan infrastructure law, we just got a $37 million grant from the Federal Railroad Administration for railroad crossing elimination. And so it's going to allow us to eliminate several crossings, but in particular, really big, massive, very tight, though, infrastructure project to take an entire intersection and put it underneath the rail.
Oh, wow.
To truly separate the streets from the rail. And so between the two separate areas, it's about $123 million.
That's a lot of money.
And so we have $61 million from Federal Highway, and we now have the gap closed from FRA, $37 million.
Okay.
And I'm really excited about that because this is a new program I know everyone's excited to see how this works.
Right.
And having even other crossings that we need to separate that this has become such an issue. Even the state supported us in our efforts because, again, it's the trickle effect throughout the rest of the state when these trains are getting stopped within Houston.
Right. Question for you regarding kind of the projects. So how important, Texas Concrete Pipe Association, we're big proponents of concrete. How important do you think concrete in general is to resilient, sustainable, transportation, drainage, infrastructure systems?
I mean, I will say what people don't think about, it's the full life cycle.
Yes.
Right? So it's the design, it's the construction, and then I have to think about operations and maintenance.
Right.
And so I will say on our concrete streets, particularly on the major roadways where we have a lot of trucks trying to get in and out the port, you talk about the resiliency of, we install a concrete street. We don't really have to touch it for about 50 years.
Yep.
Or if we do have to touch it, we can go handle one panel.
Exactly.
Versus, on the asphalt streets, which we do like on the local roads.
Right.
But on the asphalt streets, we have to mill and overlay large portions of the street in order to have that same impact.
Right.
And then just from a resiliency perspective, even a lot of our asphalt streets have concrete base.
Yep.
Especially in areas where we have very high traffic, as well as that heavy truck traffic.
Exactly. Something I always say, the analogy that I like to use is that so concrete, the foundation of your home is concrete, and you build that foundation to support your home, and that you want something to last a long time for the generations to come. And I look at it the same way with the infrastructure of the U.S. and public works and roads, highway drainage. That infrastructure is the foundation that you're building all this growing development from a booming economy in Texas. So I think it goes hand in hand.
And I will say, I mean, as I mentioned, with the green infrastructure projects we have, what's really exciting about concrete is the fact that what was once a impervious surface is being reimagined as a pervious surface. And so we do have these porous concrete panels, which is the recycled crushed concrete with just enough pores that the water can trickle through. So it's still a very exciting product.
Right.
And I hope that the industry is able to invest more to bring that cost down.
Right.
Shameless plug, I got that. Absolutely. One thing that that is a neat thing that I mentioned about TPWA is the idea that we can share best practices, great concepts, and our challenges with one another, and better understand that there's other cities going through the same thing. I was listening to a dialogue yesterday between a gentleman from the Panhandle outside of Lubbock and a lady from Central Texas who both work in very different public works departments. And the challenges happening around the Lubbock area were very similar to the ones happening in Austin. What might be one of the challenges that you have just in day-to-day operations with your department that others might share and maybe that you have a solution to?
I think a challenge, I can't even just say it's the department. I feel like it's a nationwide issue, and it's people. Having the people available to get the work done. I know many of our contractors are struggling to get people to get the work done, and so you have the bipartisan infrastructure law that's pouring all this money, and we're like, I need people. Yeah. I met with HR recently, and they're like, oh, standards. I'm like, at this point, I am at warm body. We'll show up at work, and we'll have a halfway decent attitude.
Yeah.
But that is really the biggest struggle that I face, and I think as you look at the industry, as we look around this conference, we have a very much an aging workforce. Many who are eligible to retirement under some of the older retirement systems. And so I think that is going to be a continued problem. So I think it's going to be very important for these type of conferences to get young people to understand what is public works, get them excited about being a part of public works and part of impacting their cities. I think that's just the biggest challenge that I think every city is facing.
Right.
There's going to be so many people that share that as they're listening to this. They're going to share that challenge. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's a great takeaway.
Yep.
Going back to projects going on in City of Houston, what are, if you could say, what are two really big projects that are upcoming in development right now that you want to highlight and like to brag about?
One project I really want to brag about, so we have, it's called Shepherd and Durham, so there are two parallel streets that one goes north, one goes south. And it has been really awesome.
Yeah.
So the city has a portion of the project that we just recently completed. We're doing our substantial completion in our checklist now. Then we have the TIRZ, the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone. So they have a $100 million project. So part of it is under construction now. The second phase, the city is actually going to build on behalf of the TIRZ. And then you have another TIRZ project that's also going through kind of final checkpoints. And so when you think about this entire corridor, you're talking about close to 200 million, if not more, for just this one corridor. And you're talking about making it safer for people. We have taken what was once a 4-lane road down to 3 lanes.
Wow. We're
adding wider sidewalks so that people can walk and get to all the new businesses and all the new development that is coming.
Right.
We have replaced the water lines, sewer lines, all new stormwater system in areas where water sits there all the time.
Right.
So that is really an exciting project and showing innovation in how we're building it in sections.
Right.
And having different partners build, but making sure that it's one cohesive corridor once it's done. The other one that is actually pretty cool. So it's a Lawndale bike lane project.
Okay.
Where we just took an existing road, minor, touches here and there on the rehab, but using concrete.
There you go.
We created a barrier so that people can bike and be completely barricaded from
the roadway.
From the roadway.
Okay.
And what was really awesome, because even on the transportation side, we're not quite there in marrying drainage, but we have really cool concrete slats that we put in there so that the water can still drain. So that's just an exciting,
pretty
innovative.
brilliant.
That is awesome. Absolutely.
Exactly, and it's using concrete as a way to really be a protective barrier. We've used other things, and unless it's concrete, it's just not going to stop people. And let me see, a third one. So another one that is exciting is we're getting ready to start a project on Bissonnette.
Okay.
Which Bissonnette's famous for a lot of things, and your readers can Google. We don't need to discuss all of that.
All right.
But, from a safety perspective, it is the most dangerous local road that we have in Houston, where people are dying and people are being seriously injured. And so we got a Safe Streets for All grant from the Federal Highway Administration to go ahead and make safety improvements on this 7-mile corridor.
Wow.
So that is very exciting. Again, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law and all of those that voted for it, having this funding available for this type of a safety improvement.
We should give kudos to your department and city officials in Houston for building those partnerships with FHWA. We see a lot of the dollars coming down to Texas from FHWA are being directed directly to local entities, and Houston has done. I'm gonna say it, and I'm probably gonna get killed from my DFW friends, but they've done the best job in Texas of building a coalition.
That deserves a round of applause right there. Huge round of applause right there. Yeah, hats off for that. That's a great achievement.
And also, I will say, we, working with our region, because it isn't just about, we are the big 800-pound gorilla in our region, but also bringing dollars to the smaller cities. Yeah. And so even with the Safe Streets for All grant, our region did also receive a grant to do planning. So for some of the smaller cities around Houston, they can actually develop their plan and be able to do their analysis, because we do have the resources in Houston to do some of that, to be prepared. It is exciting that these smaller jurisdictions will be able to do this analysis, and that it opens up this construction funding for them.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Patrick, you got anything else for Veronica?
I don't. I can't tell you thank you enough. I do have one thing. Y'all, we were having the most delightful conversation offset, and now that I have heard that you deal with homes in the street, and yes, I said homes in the street, goats, and bike lanes, all on top of everything else you do. You are the hardest working lady in Houston, Texas. I love it.
I tell you, 24/7.
You are. You're doing a great job. Veronica, you have been a lovely guest
Thank
on
you.
our first show. We're so glad.
That was a Freudian slip. That means you want me to come back.
That's exactly right.
We're hoping you'll come back. So that's our first episode of the Highways and Hometowns podcast. We'll come back. We have 3 more coming up: City of Waco, San Antonio, and then we'll bring more highlighted conversations on public works. And until then, we'll see you next time. Until then, I'm Steve Nilforoushan.
Patrick Tarlton. Thank y'all very much.
Take care. We'll see you next time.